Hey everybody, it's Honesty, and this is the Right Honesty podcast. We're going through the Connecticut Kings. I'm here with the Attorney General, and before we get into this week's book, she has an announcement for you.
I just wanted you to know that I object to the slander that you posted on Facebook and your IG calling me the worst. Okay? Especially since you agreed with some of my points. At the end of the day, I understand that you remain Team Cole, but let's not be completely delusional now, okay? How dare you?
I contend that while I agreed in part, I was still 100% right. Now I don't know how that's
Oh,
possible.
please. Does that work with your husband?
Hell no.
Exactly. Mhm.
Not even a little bit, but I still try. I
Yeah.
still try.
Mhm. I said, no, this heifer did not excuse me.
I was
How
right.
dare she?
I feel like Cole was in the right, really, and that Jordan was in the wrong, and I needed the world to know that you were incorrect. If that's how I feel
Oh,
about
whatever. Guess what?
it.
Everybody's right in their own mind.
That's true too.
So in your demented mind, you're right. I'll give you that. Fine.
Not demented.
If I gotta be the worst, then you gotta be demented. Sorry, not sorry. Shoot. Oh, yeah,
Anyway,
my name. Shoot.
we are here to talk about determining possession, which is the Will and Ramsey story. I'm going to go right into the overview and then we are going to get started. I will say that this is just for the feels. I think this might be my favorite one, but I'm not sure. But let me read the overview. It turns out, to no one's surprise or delight, that Will's perfect life is not so perfect. She's losing, and publicly. Her show, her man, her house, her dignity, and the list goes on. As these things are stripped away, a new and better life emerges around her with the things she's always wanted and the people she loves the most. Ramsey is no stranger to loss. After losing his mother to cancer and giving up his career for her care, he's a present help to Will as she navigates the choppy waters of anger and grief. With her untethered and leaning on him for comfort, he begins to see her as more than a friend. And as he claims the life he let go, he welcomes Will into his heart with open arms. So, initial impressions, I loved it. I swooned the whole time. I was in deep love with both of them. How about you?
Same, same. This was just so beautifully done, right? We talked last
Mhm.
week about how CCJ just consistently delivers just oof,
Mhm.
literary perfection, and this was no different. And I love that it was enemies to friends to lovers, right? We were told about the enemies part in
Yes.
kind of like historical overview, right? When they were
Yes.
both chuckling, more so on Will's part on how she was shooting the messenger basically. But it
Mhm.
was just so beautifully done. And I loved how organic it felt, right?
Mhm.
That for the two of them, they legitimately did not look at each other in that way
Yes.
until they did, right? And you hear from people in both of their lives how they saw a spark, they saw something, they chemistry, they wondered. But for Ramsey and Will, it really was legitimate friendship, platonic friendship. They
Mhm.
recognized that each other were attractive and were
Right.
good people, but it was legitimately a platonic friendship until it became something more. And I thought that was beautifully done.
Me too. And
Yeah.
what in the growing, it was like so perfect that she was they both had nightmare relationships previously,
Mm-hmm.
and they both was kind of like, and we'll get into this because I have some thoughts on why nobody, like none of her friends and family were surprised that Darian was an asshole, and they actually were
Mm-hmm.
happy that they broke up. But
Mm-hmm.
they both looked at each other's significant other when they both were in relationships and was like, I mean, if you have to, I guess you can pick them. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
Yes.
But nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. But I was hard eyes all over this thing. And there were no, between the two of them, neither of them at any point was the true villain.
Right.
Like I never felt like they intentionally hurt each other like we saw
Right.
with Jordan and Trent, and then even when in the little mini piece of Get Back that
Yeah.
Cole and Jay did. But in
Mm-hmm.
this story, I never hated either one of them. Like I never felt like Ramsey needed to be stabbed. Our stabbing victims are not in the couple.
Correct. And I think, kudos to again the CCJ for doing that in a way that it wasn't boring,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
we like the spice and the drama, even when we're identifying people to stab. That
Hmm.
adds to the overall enjoyment of the book, right? And you kind of expect in the road to we falling in love and quote unquote happily ever after, you're expecting some of these bumps and moments where you're side eyeing one of the characters, like, what are you doing? That didn't really happen here. And yet
Hmm.
it wasn't completely smooth sailing and it wasn't boring. And I just think to walk that line again just speaks to her talent, because I think some when it's too smooth, as a reader, you're kind of like, okay, well, where's the oomph? Where's the
Hmm.
spice? And I
Hmm.
I I never felt that way in this book. I felt the all the way through, even though we didn't have a quote unquote villain moment, as you say, within the couple.
Hmm.
And even the villain moments outside of them, they weren't right. The drama happens at the very beginning, right?
Yes.
And we can, we'll talk about Will's run-in with Jessica, but
Hmm.
even once they start coming together, they didn't really have a huge villain moment attacking them as a couple. Um, it, I mean, I guess you could. I guess let me take that back a little bit, because I don't view what Sarita and Connie tried to do to them. I put that in a slightly different category, right? With like the PR
Hmm.
attacking their brand and whatnot. I'm more so talking villain moment in terms of like, an ex trying to get back,
Yeah.
and or someone lying on them, and now it's causing friction within the relationship.
Right. Right.
Um, and we didn't have that, right? When Sarita and Connie came after them with the whole Bali telling the business and whatnot, they immediately banded together and
Hmm.
were like, we're not going to let this get in the way, and we know who the villain is, right? And they were clearly villains, and they were just being jerks about it. So,
Right.
but
And
yeah, yeah.
even the drama that came between them as it related to them being found out and her kind of being like, don't make a fool of me.
Yeah.
And then the baby and her potentially going into early labor. I felt like even in what I liked about those moments, not so much once we get to the early labor, but definitely between the banana stickers, which is we'll talk about in a second, and
Uh-huh.
the whole "don't make a fool of me." That
Mm-hmm.
both of those, you could see that she was still dealing with the fact that that relationship didn't work, even though she wasn't pining over Darius.
Right.
And
Right.
I
She
feel
was,
like that's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. She was wounded, right? I mean, it
right,
was wounded over what was supposed to be, while acknowledging that clearly he was not right for her.
right.
Clearly he wasn't right for her. Once she realized that what he had been doing with Jessica had been going on for years, and she's just like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, right? So this wasn't a one-time thing. I mean, the hurt is gonna be the hurt, but to
Right.
know that it was being carried on for years, right? That's a lot of effort and energy going into covering your tracks. And I remember she said something like, the repeated lying, right? The
Mm-hmm.
repeated, oh babe, they just make things up. And she's like, meanwhile, I'm looking at these photos, I'm looking at these videos,
Right.
and how your tattoos changed over the years, how
Yeah.
your hairstyles changed.
Hmm.
Like, this wasn't just something that started a month or two ago. So
And he
I
says
got
as
that.
much. Yeah, he says as much when he says, I haven't touched her in probably a year.
Right.
And she kind of recoils, like, sir, you do not get a prize.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. I did love, kind of jumping ahead. That was one of my, when she runs into him and Jessica in the supermarket and he realizes
Yes.
that she's pregnant. I
Mm-hmm.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know how, her mom had said, look, he's going to realize what he's
Right.
lost in you. That's what mamas are supposed to say, right? But you could
Mm-hmm.
feel that in that moment.
Yes.
I felt that, right? I felt him really feeling the loss of what he sacrificed,
Right. Right.
um, doing what he did in that particular moment. I felt it more in that moment, even than when they ran into each other at the house, right? And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, please, don't throw 8 years away.
Right. And then using CCJ has before used like children or miscarriage as a way to pull the covers off who a person really is. And so
Yeah.
we see that here. We see it in, I think it's like a follow up to the rights, whichever one don't have a leg.
Yep.
And his
Jason.
yes, and she has a miscarriage, and he take off running and don't stop till like somebody got to
Yep.
come pick him up. And then there
Yep.
was one more that I can't.
Nixon and Charlie
Yes,
fall in
that's
love
the
again.
one.
Yep.
That's the one where he goes out 10 minutes almost, to her mind after it
Yes.
and goes and sleeps with somebody else. And oh, the most recent one in the with the people. You know what I'm talking about? Oh Lord.
Behind behind
One
the
of them,
scenes.
yeah, one of them has a motorcycle and then shop and she ends up with the BDSM motorcycle man.
Maybe one more
Maybe
time.
yes, yes,
Yep.
yes, 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 yes.
Yep.
That was another one.
Yep.
And this idea that you know infertility or miscarriages is hard, period.
Yeah.
And this idea that the non-pregnant person in the relationship sh- either like just figuring out like how are they feeling it and how are they dealing with it, especially when the pregnant person has had like a double loss. So not only do I
Yeah.
have like this medical thing, but it's also the dream that we shared of this baby that we were going
Yeah.
to have. And so it was very much like if he went off to mourn the dream, which is a question that she asked him, like, did you even wait
Mm-hmm.
until I was out of the hospital?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
in the other scenarios, I think for the guy, it was like I couldn't fix it. I was trying to get a hold of you. I was trying to grab you and help
Yeah.
you and hold you up, but I couldn't get to you. Where
Yeah.
it's like he didn't even try.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't take it. Like some people can go with you through life struggles. And some people just are not built that way. And so matching him up against Ramsey, who is very much built that way, I thought was like it was a great way to paint that picture to highlight how good Ramsey is because she even says like I know I've been a lot like after a couple of weeks she's like all right man I know I've been pulling on you I've been I've
Yep.
been a lot and I just want to say thank you and he's like you ain't got to thank me for nothing like this is life this is what friends do and so I think it's just a great way to show how couples handle something so serious in their
Yeah.
relationship.
And the parallel to that on Ramsey's side is remember when he said that while his mother was dying, Lena
Yes,
wanted to talk about cake flavors, right?
yes,
And he's like, my mother is dying. Like
right.
I don't give a flying fig. Like I don't want to
Exactly.
talk about wedding anything with you.
Right.
And how do you not understand that? What I have learned, and I've been married a long enough to have experienced for better and worse,
Hmm.
is I've concluded that you need a wartime and a
Yeah.
peacetime spouse,
Yeah.
right? Because to your point, there are some people who they don't have it in them to
Yep.
be your wartime spouse,
Hmm.
right? They can only be there for peace. And you can see that when marriages go through some things and it doesn't come out the other side. And we're not all built the same. And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard when you're saying those vows and you're married. When you said those vows, right? I think of how little I really understood what I was committing
Ooh,
to,
child.
because you built up the day and the
That's
dress
right.
and the flowers and the cake and the this and the that, all of the mystique surrounding the ceremony of it, and then you get to living it day in
Yep.
and day out, and then life does its thing, right?
Yep.
And you don't know what that's going to look like, and you don't always know how you're going to handle things. Um, and much less how your spouse is going to handle it, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think, to your point about, for Will and Darius, it was the miscarriages. And then for Ramsey, even though you could tell that he had seen things about Lena where he knew in his heart of hearts that they were not a good fit, right? But
Right.
they were back together, and she's, just kind of oblivious, and callously focused on planning the wedding while he's watching the most important person in his life um wither away, right?
Yes.
And you're standing by helplessly, there was a lot about Ramsey because I lost my mother to cancer. I got it.
Mm-hmm.
He was the character that I related to the most because of that.
Mm.
But I couldn't imagine, um, at that point in time, being in a relationship with someone who wants to talk about something as ridiculous as cake samples.
Yes.
And you're like,
Yes.
I'm literally dealing with life and death here, and you want to talk to me about red velvet versus devil's food?
Yes.
Girl, bye, right?
Bye. Bye. Goodbye. I
Yeah,
think it was beautifully done. And the other part of it is, what's the definition of wartime and what's the definition of peacetime? Because I think that Darius had wartime wholly fucked up. He was quite
absolutely.
confused. Like,
Correct.
he thought
Correct.
wartime was, I cheated, but I get it now. My bad, homie. Let's figure out how to make it work. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wartime is not abuse. Wartime is not infidelity. I mean, if you choose for wartime to be infidelity, that's your business. Like, everybody's different. And it's funny. I was watching Black Love when Sally Richardson was on there.
Richardson,
Yeah,
and
and
Dondre
she,
Whitfield.
yes, and she was like, who I had a crush on from the Cosby Show. But anyway,
Who didn't?
she exactly,
Robert.
and Clarence the So Fine. What's his name?
Yes.
Bumper Johnson. Anyway, so from Amen. But
Yes.
what Sally was saying was, after 20 years, I can't say I would leave him for cheating on me. Like, we got
Yeah.
teenagers. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, was it a one night stand? Because maybe we can get past that. So, like,
Yeah.
if you've been with somebody and y'all have a history, and up until now they have had their head on straight, but for whatever reason, all of a sudden, if you decide to work through that, that could be wartime. But what Darius was describing was not wartime to me. Sir,
No.
you cheated like 7 of the 8 years that we was together. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You never were in this with me.
And also, when Will says to him in that same conversation at the house, she's like, maybe if you had come to me
Yes.
of your own volition and come clean, maybe
Yes.
I might have been able to get past this. But not only did you do what you did, but you allowed me to be publicly humiliated. Can
Mm-hmm.
we just take a quick detour for a second? I have always believed, with the whole Tiger Woods and his ex-wife situation,
Yes.
I have always believed that she went ham on him, not because of the infidelity, but the public humiliation,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
right? It was, you going to be that sloppy that
Mm-hmm.
Star Magazine is printing this credible story with
Mm-hmm.
20 plus women. You got me out here looking crazy.
Yep.
I've always believed that it was the public humiliation more so than the cheating, right? Because he
I
was
agree.
already famous and wealthy when they got together. I am very much of the belief that when you marry someone that's in that realm, not that you go in and you should expect cheating, but if it has not if there has not been some acknowledgement of all that comes with that,
Right. Right.
then that's a huge conversation that needed to happen, that should have happened, because they're getting it thrown at them at every place they go. But so that
Mm-hmm.
was just that side detour of, I got when Will was like, had you come to me, but
Yes.
you let me find out in the most, you know,
Humiliating
public,
way. Yes.
humiliating, embarrassing way
Mm-hmm.
possible, with this girl blowing up your spot
Receipts.
on television.
Mm-hmm.
And then you standing there, and I figure out that this time it's credible because I'm looking at your face and you're wearing the oh shit expression.
Yes. 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 So without a doubt, he was
Child.
one of the people that needed to be stabbed multiple
Amen.
times.
Amen.
Multiple
Multiple.
times.
Multiple. Leave the
Because
knife
he's the
in. Just
worst.
leave it in.
No, for real. Which is why, like you were saying, I was so glad that when he saw her and he was put together the red hot Cheetos or whatever she had, and was like, "Oh my God, you're pregnant." Yes, it was where he was like happy for her, and she was like, "I don't give a fuck, don't touch me, goodbye." It was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
him getting like understanding the gravity of it, and good choke here
Yeah.
again, choke,
Exactly.
choke.
Joke and die. Thank you, sir. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Done with
Goodbye.
you, done with you. Yeah, no, okay, so another thing, let's see, that I loved, are we at love yet? I don't know. Love, I'm gonna just run down the list. We can talk about any one of them or none of them at all, but I love like
Yep.
everything. I love the trip to Bali. My favorite part was the daredevil part, at the beginning where she was zip lining and wanting to do all this
Yes.
crazy stuff. And he was like, "Ma'am, I just signed a contract. Can we go sit down, please?"
Right. 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 And she's like, "What
um,
are you scared?
yes.
You
I
scared?"
loved her ruining his shoes. I thought that was an amazing scene with her with the golf
Yes.
club spreading the chocolate.
That was beautifully done. The petty
Yes,
was, I was like, this is like classy petty, right? This is
yes,
like, because it was like gourmet chocolates.
for sure. And I support it. This is the best way to do it. And her mom was like, "Are you for real right now?" And she's like, "Yes, yes, I am for real right
Yes.
now."
Yes.
I
Yes.
loved him feeling the baby move for the first time. Her parents being sports legends in their own right. The pregnancy shoot and the proposal, the way that her friendship, like the transition, which you've already talked about, and then the banana stickers, which is my favorite scene, but we'll talk about that during surprise. And then my absolute favorite, there is a line in this book that to me is one of the best lines ever written in romance. "Take this dick like the champ you are."
Yes, honey. Yes. Talk about inspiration. He's like, you can do it. You will do it.
Right. I said,
Take
I
it.
am no more good. No more good. I'm done.
Whew.
I'm done.
Ooh,
Okay. What
child,
about
I'm
you,
fanning
love?
myself.
And then we'll break down which all of it.
We talked about kind of the true enemies to friends to unexpected lovers. I loved that Will's experience, and this kind of goes back to, you were making comments last week about insecurities, right? And
Hmm.
everybody having them. And this woman who, again, who was a good woman, right? She was not plastic and she was not putting on a front.
Hmm.
But she definitely had the America's sweetheart image, coming from the best of circumstances, right? Sports royalty, things all worked out for her, right?
Hmm.
Got the Olympic gold medals, and now in journalism, this fine fiance, and it all fell apart.
Right.
And her having to rediscover Will, right?
Hmm.
She was deeply, deeply wounded, and getting to the point where she was letting social media get in her head, right? And
Hmm.
he got to remember, Ramsey gets upset with her
Yes.
about, when they do the
Yes.
workout. And he's like, if this is for you, fine. But if this is because you've been reading comments and now you're downing yourself, I'm not
Right.
doing this with you.
Right.
My favorite moment in the book, and this particular line, like, brought me to tears, is when he is reflecting on his mother's birthday, right? and
Yes.
and the baby moves, and that's the first time that he feels the baby moves. But Will says to him, she reminds him of when he had told her that his mother had made the joke about, you should get together with her and give me some beautiful
Mm-hmm.
grandbabies or something like that. And Will says to Ramsey, this baby is the manifestation of your mother's dreams for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that just, because my mom is not here to was not here to see my son born, but I know she prayed for him years before,
Mm. That's
he
beautiful.
walked this earth. My mother prayed for him, and so that
Mm-hmm.
scene just, because Mother's Day and my mother's birthdays, those are the two hardest days of the year for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I am, years past her actual passing, and I miss her every day, but those
Mm-hmm.
2 days remain very tough for me. So I felt him, it's still being fresh, but especially on her birthday, but Will speaking that life to him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
About the life they created together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, CCJ is like having a little bit of church.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get myself
Mm-hmm.
together. In this one
Yeah.
line, that one scene, like I just felt the emotion of that and I loved it. I loved that Ramsey, his style, right? Because I could
Yes.
visualize this incredibly, fashionable man that everybody's like, oh my God, he's always put together, the tie, the
Yes.
pot, the pocket square. There's some former athletes when I see them on like ESPN, and my husband and I will be like, oh, that whole
Uh-huh.
combination, yes, so and so, right? And there are a couple who consistently bring it.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember reflecting on that, being like, okay, because even though Ramsey was short, it was like,
Right.
don't get it twisted, right? The height is
Right.
maybe the one area
Right. Don't
where
sleep on
he
my skill set.
exactly in any area, right? What
Right.
God didn't give me in terms of height, He gave me in terms of speed and talent and
Right.
smarts and all those other things. Loved I loved the maternity shoot as well. The visual of the little crown,
Mm-hmm.
super, sitting on top of her
Yes.
belly and whatnot. Just yeah, I mean, it's like what was there not to love, right? Like other
Right.
than
Honestly.
you know what was there not to love? I even loved the Jessica confrontation, although I loved and I hated it, right? I loved the
Mm-hmm.
moment where Will is like, bitch, don't even come at me with your nonsense. Okay, roll on. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I of course wanted to stab Jessica, but I was just kind of like two things on that, right? It was number one, listen, where you'll hold him with your chest out, okay? Say it with your
Right.
chest, all right?
Right.
Because you were sleeping with her man for years. Please do not see me in the street and now you want to come and make it seem like you tripped and fell on his dick and you don't know how it happened and you're sorry. You're not sorry. You're
You're
not sorry.
not.
So I would rather you just not even say anything to me, right? Or you sit in that. You sit in your hold and you
Mm-hmm.
bask in it because you did what you did. But what I hated about that, which was I thought very realistic, was how it then got turned around, right? How it got spun as angry black woman attacking
Yep.
white woman. And unfortunately, many of us in navigating professional settings have had that experience with, a white woman who, comes into the interaction hot, right?
Mm-hmm.
1,000 degrees hot. And when you match that energy, they dissolve into tears. And somehow now you are managing their reaction to your reaction to their attack. Um,
Right.
and knowing that
Weaponizing
you're not going to get
tears.
the benefit. Yeah, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, right? Because it feeds it right into the angry black woman stereotype and,
Yes.
you know, so on and so forth. So,
No, I agree. That completely lined up for me. And I think it really locked in why she could still be wounded from the relationship, but not miss him. And they really are two different things. And she was explaining to her mom, like, I am over him. Like, you know, she said, I'm not gonna cry at all, but she does. But the tears that she shed had really nothing to do with, have nothing at all actually to do with wanting him back or Jessica being white or whatever, whatever. I mean, her being white was kind of like, okay, I don't know why you would do that, but go off. But
right.
it was really about, I was trying. I was trying. I could tell sometimes, like, it was about her. It was like,
Yeah.
how many red flags did I miss? I was
Right.
really trying and you weren't trying with me. I thought we were
Yeah.
going somewhere. No, everything wasn't perfect, but I was trying. And you really, really, really did not give a shit.
Yeah. And what did I do? Why did I deserve this from
Right.
you? This kind of betrayal from you? Why did I, and I think many of us that, that resonates, right? Of why did I deserve that from you?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think we phrase it in what did I do to deserve that? But many of
Right.
us are just kind of like, what was it about me that you would betray me like that you would hurt me like that?
Right. So
Yeah,
publicly, so intentionally.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
which is why it's always odd to me when the other person is like, I didn't mean it. Well, what
right,
did you mean?
right.
Because I am thoroughly confused because I don't know how you cheat on someone and don't mean it. Like, what? I don't understand. So it really,
Meaning they meant the act. They didn't mean
they
the
didn't mean the consequences. Well,
consequences.
that's your problem.
Exactly. Well,
Right?
I
But,
agree. I
but
agree.
you can't make that my problem. And that's the sentiment that I got when they finally were able to have the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, let's talk about the banana stickers.
Sure.
So this is my favorite scene in the story.
Mm,
Like if I have 7 or 12 favorite scenes, but this is my favorite above all of them because it is very, very difficult to let somebody that far in. And to me, this was, like she said, really embarrassing that
yeah,
I have to admit to myself that we had gotten to a point where intimacy, and I won't even say intimacy, I'll say sex was a chore. Who knows if there was
right,
any intimacy going on at all, and when was the last time
right,
they had any true intimacy? But for her, I immediately felt her cringe and felt her like, I don't want to go back to this place when he was like, hey, what's this? He's like happy go lucky. It's no big deal.
right.
And it takes her to a place of like, God damn, you know what I'm saying? And she blows up in him kind of, and he goes on to mind his business. I love the fact that he was giving her space, but then,
Yeah,
that thing kept tapping on his shoulder. And he goes and talks to her, and she lets it out. She finally says what it is, and he is. So I was proud of, if I can, you can be proud of a fictional character. Proud of her for being honest with herself, and I'm sorry, being honest with him and letting that
yeah,
truth come out, and of him for being so understanding.
yeah.
And I think this was another example of him being a wartime partner, but not just
Yes,
on the outside, because it's one thing to be a wartime partner when something is happening externally, a person loses their job, something happens, blah blah blah. But when you get into the nitty gritty of your person, of your
yes,
insecurity, of your
yes.
issues, and that person still enjoys the view, that's something. And
And he
so go
and
ahead.
he did it in a way I thought, um, where it wasn't dismissive, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes people, in an attempt to make you feel better,
That's right.
they're actually dismissive of your feelings because they're
That's right.
telling you they're like, you shouldn't feel that way because you're awesome and you're amazing, or whatever it is
Yes.
that they're saying. But in phrasing it that way, it's dismissive of how you're feeling, right? As
Hmm.
opposed to just being like, I hear you, but I'm not going to let you go down this rabbit hole of beating yourself up and tying yourself to things that are making you feel bad.
Right.
I'm not going to sit by and let you do that,
Hmm.
because that's not what friends do, right?
Hmm.
And I think, it was interesting because, again, kind of going back to the day to day of marriage, it was on the one hand, Will had, I think every marriage has those, the ebbs and the flow, right?
Right.
And we all do different things, um, to stay engaged. And I think that what tends to happen when you see people after, years together and then they break up, people are like, oh, what happened? I think they just didn't stay engaged, right? And so
Hmm.
they continue to evolve in ways where they were no longer compatible with each other. and
Mhm.
didn't realize that was happening over time because they weren't staying engaged with each other.
Right.
And so I got where Will was like, look, I had gotten to the point where I was making a point to schedule it because we had long stopped being spontaneous. We had
Mhm.
long stopped, it wasn't just, coming in and, clothes falling off, right?
Right.
But realizing that it had crossed from something where she was being thoughtful and deliberate about to it had become a chore,
Mhm.
right? It had become this thing of one more thing that I've put on my to-do list that I've said, this must get done this week.
Mhm.
Um, so, it was, I thought that was real. I thought that
Yeah.
was real of how you can, because there are some people who then, the flip side of that is they don't bother with stickers. They don't bother. They just
Right,
don't bother.
right, right, right. Mind your
Just don't
business. That's what you
bother.
do. Right. You go over there
Right?
and I'll be over here.
Exactly. They just don't bother.
Mhm.
Um, but it, kind of realizing in retrospect, like I'm putting forth this effort, I was prioritizing him in the way that I knew how, right? In the
Yeah.
way that made sense to me, where like, yeah, I put it in my planner to make sure that I didn't forget and it didn't slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
And this is what he did to me anyway. Yeah. Can I just say what surprised me, which was actually another moment that I love, the Ramsey Lena run-in at the restaurant, because she didn't make Lena the cliche catty bitchy ex, right? Not even when Lena ran into Will at the doctor's office. But let's do the Ramsey Lena run-in where Lena's like,
Mhm.
she's a good look for you, right? You all will be good together. She looks at you the way
Yep,
I
yep,
think
yep,
you
yep.
wanted
Yeah.
me to look at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you deserve that, right? You deserve that. And I just loved, even though, look, she was like, look,
Mhm.
I've moved on to bigger and better things. I'm not worried about you, so on and so forth. But that moment where she acknowledged that Will was good for him and was basically,
Mhm.
I'm happy for you, and she's a good look for you. That was a really nice moment that I was like, they could have just,
Right.
CCJ didn't have to give us that, right? They could have just run into each other and there was no drama. They could have run into each other and he's just like, I appreciate you putting out the statement about nothing going on. And she's like, because I don't think anything did go on. But for her to take it to that next step and her to be
Right.
like, she's a good look for you. I really like that, because prior to that point, all what we've heard of
Right.
Lena, we're kind of
That
like,
she was
bitch,
on
right? I
married
mean,
to medicine or some
so
kind of
yes,
love and hip hop real housewives. Yeah.
yes, is exactly. You're just kind of like this soulless,
Mhm.
vapid, plastic woman who ripped
Right.
poor Ramsey's heart out, wanted to talk about cake samples while his mother was dying. So I thought that was a really nice surprise where we got to see this side character showing some mature depth,
Mhm.
right, about her.
And I think it
Um,
shows that Lena's eyes were open the whole time.
absolutely,
Like
absolutely,
she knew what she wanted and she was going to get it. Now
absolutely
Ramsey was not necessarily, he wasn't the guy for that. She ends up finding the guy for that in the basketball player, but
correct.
like she's very clear about the trajectory she wanted her life to take and the kind of things she wanted in her life and the dreamy eyed, you know, deep, 50 years married. She was like, I mean, if we get there, but that ain't really, you know what I'm
Correct.
saying?
Correct.
This is a transaction. I'm about that money. I'm about my image. I want to have my own show, or I have my own show. And had, once he figured out what time it was, she could very easily let him go because she was like, okay, well, now that you realize what I'm really about, then and this has worked for you, so okay, let's move on.
Right.
And I can almost appreciate somebody that even in their self-centeredness or their shallowness, they're self-aware.
Exactly. No, I agree with that. And you know what I also thought was interesting about that dynamic is I know that from his perspective, he felt like, she was looking at him as, oh, I'm gonna take this little hood boy and I'm gonna upgrade
Mhm.
him and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. And I, whereas I thought that more so, as we saw in that exchange, from her perspective, she just wanted someone she could tolerate, right? She's like, I'm
Right.
not looking for, the hard eyes, and I'm not looking for any of that because I've watched
Mhm.
my father take my mother through the ringer. I have zero patience, desire for that. I just want someone that I
Mhm.
can build with, like a business partnership.
Yes.
And he
Yes.
was he was almost too sappy for her, right? He was too romantic for her, and she's kind of like, no, no, no. This is an arrangement, right? Like, I'm not looking for, you're looking for something that I'm not interested in. I want a partnership. I don't want, the romantic piece of it. But her acknowledging, you're a good guy, you deserve that, and it's clear you will get that in this woman,
Mhm.
and I'm happy
Mhm.
for you. Go forth and be
Yes.
happy.
And I think that's borne out because another scene that I really like from him is the nobody but you scene where he leaves camp and comes to her house when he's not
Yes,
supposed to be there. And
yes,
she's like, Ramsey, they want to tell these people that we're in love. Like, you got to really, and you on Twitter with these chicks. So they're talking about you as if it was yesterday. And they have a little bit of an argument. And he understands where she's coming from once she's like, Ramsey, I cannot.
right,
Like,
yeah,
I cannot do this again.
yeah,
Where he's like nobody but you.
yeah,
And the flip side of that, which was a moment for me, but the flip side of that is the way that she's so present for him, like through
yes,
the games,
yes,
through the workout, and when before he gets put back on the team, and like whether it's text messages or come on let's get something to eat,
yep,
or it's like all these little moments that accumulate and really give you this picture that like y'all in love.
yes, yes. But
Like,
y'all just don't see it,
and it
right?
wasn't one-sided.
No, no. That support, right? That super happy, and how she didn't even hesitate, right?
Yep.
When he shares with her, um after he runs the 4-2 or 4-3, whatever
Hmm.
it was, and she's like, well, what happens next, right? And she's genuinely excited for him, knowing
Hmm.
that it means the show that they've built together,
Right.
right? That he can't possibly play the show, and I mean play the game and be on the show. But you can
Hmm.
tell her excitement is authentic, it's legitimate, and it's
Yes.
on 1,000, right? It's not
Yes.
like bittersweet or mixed emotions. She is genuinely excited for him, as if they don't have a show together, right? As if this
Yes.
decision has nothing to do with impacting the show that they've built together. And I love that as well. That
Hmm.
she was part of the circle, right? She was part of the family that he had built. And, we talked about that a little bit, when we talked about Jade and Trent, about the family you build, right? And with
Hmm.
him, it wasn't that he didn't have family, but the most important piece was no longer there, right?
Right.
But having these other individuals, um, Reggie when he gets out, Clayton, who I want to chat a little bit about
Hmm.
Clayton,
Yeah.
and then Will is part of the circle, and Jordan, right, who positions him
Yes.
to get that opportunity, and then introduces him to Eli Richardson, and so this
Hmm.
family that you build, and then I also love the conversation that he had with Trent, right, about well,
Yeah.
what's your inspiration, and it comes back to
Yes.
family,
Well, yes.
right?
Yep.
It
Yep.
comes
Yep.
back
Yep.
to family, and now it's this family that you're building. Before it was your mother, and she's no
Hmm.
longer here, but this family that you're building, right? Let them be your
Hmm.
inspiration. And he takes that, and it just, oh my goodness, right? It just
Yes.
literally runs
Like,
with me.
and that's the thing. Yes, that's the thing about this story in particular. Even though when you look at all of them, there are similar elements in all of them. So Trent humiliated Jay, and we see Darius humiliates Cole.
Mm-hmm.
We
Will.
look at Will. You look at JJ and Cole, and how they were really kind of running past each other and talking past each other, but
Yeah.
were eventually able to slow down enough to get on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And we run into that a little bit in the beginning. Well, definitely with Nate and Sloan, who are
Yes.
running past each other. And well,
Yes.
actually, he's standing still. She running past him.
Correct. Correct.
But eventually, she slows down long enough for them to get on the same page. And so you get these mirror images, kind of, even in, I think we talked about this last week, Parker and her
Right.
guy,
Mm-hmm.
could have been a Eli Mel situation, except for he had CTE and, traumatic brain injury, all that. So it didn't go that route. But if you look at what we have from this series as a whole, everybody was in their little world. They were in their lane for the most part. They was minding their business, and they smacked into somebody that made them look at themselves, and they had to make a decision.
Yeah.
And but I like this book in particular because the two of them are so like magnetic.
Yeah.
Like they're so drawn to each other in a
Mm-hmm.
way that they didn't even know it was happening until it was already done.
Yeah.
But they both very much needed someone to hold on to. You were there all the time. And
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And like I said, I think being able to tell, that's a familiar trope. It's done all the time. And I think
Hmm.
the ability to do it in a way where it doesn't feel like been there, done that, right?
Yes,
Like
yes,
I believed legitimately that they were not looking at each other in that way until they did. I believe that
right.
1000%, even though remember when Will tells him that Darius had said something to her the year before they were at some event and the two of them were dancing, and he said that there was a, I forget how it was described now, but like an energy or a look. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, the two of them at that time, that was the furthest thing from their minds, right? Like they were
Right.
truly not checking for each other in that way. And you might
Is
say,
that the
well,
one? Is that the one with the caption that was like mood, like he was looking back at her? No, that wasn't at the
no,
wedding.
no, that wasn't at the wedding, but she says to him, Darius said, we were out at some, like I think it was like an award ceremony or
Oh,
something,
oh,
and they
oh, okay. Yeah.
danced
Oh,
together,
yeah, 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 yeah.
right?
Okay. Yes.
And on the one hand, you could say, well, Darius was projecting because, he was
Yes.
being a dirty dog. Yes, but also, right, as we noted, their friends and their family, right, his mom, her parents, they all saw something, but
Mm-hmm.
it really was crafted in a way that it was clear these two people did not look at each other in that way until they did.
Right.
And it was like, oh goodness, right? Yes, you've
Right.
been attractive all along. Yes, you've been charismatic and beautiful and sexy and supportive. You've been fantastic all along. But I think
Hmm.
Ramsey kind of maybe says it best, right? Because they both had like this moment of reflection when they think back. And I think Ramsey was like, she was with her, Darius, when they met. And
Hmm.
he, saw her and acknowledged that she was drop dead gorgeous and all of that. And as he got to know her, saw that she was as beautiful inside as she was outside. But she was untouchable, right? She was with
Hmm.
someone. He was not thinking about her in that way. And I believed it, right?
Hmm.
As I read it, I absolutely believed it. I didn't get the feeling, bro, you lying to yourself. No, he put her in a category, right? Just like she put him in a category of untouchable. You are my friend. It is purely
Right.
platonic. Until
Right.
they were no longer in those categories. And then it was like, oh,
Let's figure this out. Yeah.
this has been here all along. My goodness.
Uh-huh.
Well.
Yeah. Let's talk about Clayton.
So I didn't realize until this reread, and what's funny is that I've read the book several times, that Clayton shows up again in Equivalent Exchange.
Yes.
And I was just kind of, so my thought was, on your question, who do you want to get their own book? I'm like, Clayton, because I want to know, is Clayton ever going to stop being community peen? Is Clayton ever
Right.
just like, is it one too many busted windshields? And he finally says, you know what? I don't want my tires getting slashed. I don't want another black eye. I don't want to get embarrassed,
Right.
because when we run into him with, Karis and Lakin, Clayton is still being Clayton. And you know what? That's real too. I think we all
Right.
know somebody who just, particularly a man who's just, they just gonna be that old
Yeah,
uncle,
can't get right.
right? Just nasty at the cookout, trying to talk to the younger. And it's like, just sit down, please. Sit down,
Please
right?
go sit down.
Sit,
Um,
yes.
I agree. Clayton, so I low key wanted him and Soraya to get a short
Right, right.
because their exchange was really cute. But I also feel
Hmm.
like Soraya is too good for him.
Yes, yes,
That he doesn't deserve her. I would like to see him, which is something that we also see often, but it's delicious when it's done well. The guy that can't get right being leveled by a
yes.
woman who he goes after who denies him until the very last minute.
Correct.
So almost like a Lena Light.
Yeah,
That's kind
yeah.
of like I can't figure out why you keep coming around me. Do I need to put out a restraining order? Like what? Why do you? You know what I mean? Like very much not impressed, very much not moved, very much not interested. A little bit like I wrote this. I think I sent this to you. I wrote this short story that I am going to put out in a book before the Lord returns. With what's the man name? Oh, Fabian and Giselle, where he's a comedian and he's
Yes,
telling this story of how he meets her,
yes.
and she levels him from go.
Yep,
Like at no time in their interaction does she give him even a morsel of I'm impressed by you or
yep,
you're a catch. Even to the
yep.
very end, she makes him feel like 2 cents. And I want that for Clayton.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, the other way that you could see that done is because we mentioned Boomerang earlier, right? The Jacqueline character, right? The Robin
Yes.
Givens character, who was Eddie Murphy's equal, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he had never encountered his equal, and there he is clutching the sheets and
Right.
calling and trying to get on the calendar and trying to get time, and she really was his equal,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even more so, right? Because she she comes back, but it's just for the convenience of it, right? Not because she
Right.
necessarily had fallen in love with him. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I would love to see Clayton, get his comeuppance, because those
For
tend to
sure.
be really entertaining reads, right?
Yep.
The battle of wills and met your
Mm-hmm.
match, and you know, yeah, yeah, that would be sweet, but it probably
Yep,
won't
for sure.
happen.
No, we're not gonna get it, but we can dream.
Right, right. She's like, that would be a no.
Right. There was somebody else I wanted to her parents. I thought her parents were cute. I love
Yes,
when we get to see parents that like each other,
yes,
um, and that want to be around each other. Um, and even the conversation that he has with Ramsey, that her dad
yes,
has with Ramsey, Jack, I think it's
yes.
jackhammer and sledgehammer,
Yep,
the hammer and
yep,
the sledgehammer, something.
yep.
And she's kind of like on pins and needles, and her mama, it very reminded me very much of the Cosby Show when it was Vanessa and Robert. Like, ain't nothing wrong with that boy, I'm just talking to him, just mind
Right,
your business.
right, right,
So so her mom is kind of like, he's not going to hurt him, girl, mind you talk to me, don't worry about what they talking about.
right.
um but I appreciated how protective they were of her, not because she needed it, but because they knew that she was in such a precarious place.
Yes,
Meaning
yes,
like she wasn't a damsel, but she just got hit hard, like somebody rung her bell a little bit.
yes.
And so I want to make sure, because her other friend does it too, right before he hears the heartbeat through the her cell phone. So like on at least two instances, people make it clear to him, we ain't playing about her. Now
Right,
we let this other one slide in and we ain't say shit because
right,
she was happy and she grown, but we ain't gonna let
right.
it happen again. So let's be clear.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
and I loved them loving each other, and I loved them saying to Ramsey, we know you in the family and we've been cool a long time, but I want you to know that I don't really care about you. I will murder you.
yes.
I won't feel bad about it. I will go get something to eat right after. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Right, right. I, you know, when you mentioned her parents, it made me also think back to getting schooled and Amara and Joseph
Yes.
Sr., right? And I
Yes.
love, we get enough to see, these couples of a certain age still,
Yep.
being and feeling sexy, right? And
Yep.
loving towards each other and engage with each other, right? They're not this like sexless old people
Yes.
blobs, right? And so I
Hmm.
appreciate that because God willing, we all get to that point, right?
Right. Right. And this
I
idea that you don't stop being sexual
That's right.
after
That's right.
like 45.
just
Like,
and just
no, you
and or
can.
just because your children are adults, right? And I thought that
Yes.
was well done
Yes.
because it wasn't in your face with Will's parents, but there was definitely that clear undercurrent that her parents still very much loved and were in love with each other.
Hmm.
And the relationship that she had with them wanting to be supportive while also giving her truth serum, right, and being
Yeah.
honest with her. Her father, you know, in the conversation with Ramsey, and her father being like, look, I'm not going to apologize for doing everything in my power to help my child. And I thought that Ramsey handled it perfectly because he was like, well, you and I occupy or would occupy different roles in her life, right? So I would be
Right.
supportive, I would amp her up, I would give her feedback, I wouldn't go behind her back. And her
Yeah.
father was like, yeah, well, okay, fine, whatever.
Right.
I said what I said, right? Like he heard him and he respected him. And I think Jack was still just like, well, she's my daughter. That's my baby girl. And I reserve to the right to handle things as I see fit to protect her. But I did think the line, he was like, ooh, they could do a story on us, the jackhammer and the sledgehammer. And I was like, look,
Hmm.
Daddy got a crush. Daddy's like, listen,
Right. You extra
right?
excited. Go sit down.
Right, but
Um,
also on some, you hurt my baby and it's on and popping, like I will
right.
lay
I
you
don't want you to
out.
worry about it. I can find you. Don't worry
That's
about
right.
whether or not I'm gonna find you.
That's right.
Understand that I'm gonna find you.
That's right.
Like, no, and I think too, once their son is born, Ramsey understands what that is.
Yes. Yes.
Because you can say that as the boyfriend when there's really nothing on the line,
Yep.
but when you hold that baby in your hands for the first time, talk to me then
Yep.
about how far you're willing to go or not go for your child. So especially because we see that when she does give birth after the Super Bowl, they have to whisk the baby away, and she
Yep.
is like distraught
Yeah.
because somebody got my kid. Like, what's
Yep.
going on? Those realizations or sort of understanding her parents really come full circle once he has that moment at the end. You know what I mean? Because I think at that point he could not rightly say he wouldn't do the same thing.
And I also, the undercurrent of what her father was saying was, the white people do it all the time, right? And
There you
nobody
go.
nobody bats an eyelash, right? That's just
That's
how it's
right.
done. So I'm not going to apologize. And and her father didn't, like, he didn't see it as, I'm doing this because she can't do it on her own,
Hmm.
right? His position was, it's not that simple. If
Right.
only the world were that fair, right? If only
Yes.
the world were that fair, where all it takes is, you deserve to be there, you've done the work. The world is
Right.
not that fair. So I'm not going to
Exactly.
apologize for trying to position my child as best as I can with the resources I have at my disposal in a
Yes.
world that's unfair.
Unfair, off, just off top.
Exactly, right?
Like,
Exactly.
yeah. And
So,
I think looking at how much he and Carla probably went through,
yep, yep,
as Black athletes,
yep,
and understanding that if we were of the 0 point something percent that made it, and my daughter has this skill and we were able to push her and help her get to where, you better believe I'm gonna put some wind at her back and keep her going.
yes,
Like, why would I ever make her work as hard as I did? Like, and
yes.
all of what that means, to be a Black athlete, either in the civil rights era or not long after the civil rights era. It's like, no, 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 you don't understand.
Right, right.
Like,
So it
I'm gonna do
wasn't
everything I can
patronizing,
for her.
right? It
Exactly.
wasn't patronizing, and you could tell that her, like, Jack got it, and like that's why I like that conversation, because he understood what Ramsey was saying. He still said what he said, right? But it wasn't in a pig-headed, you haven't made any valid points. He was like, I hear
Mm-hmm.
you, but I stand by what I've said, and it was informed by, to you, what you just said, what they had been through, what they had seen, so on and so forth. So, yeah, it was just, again, they got the son-in-law they actually wanted, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
His mother's wishes came true, and it worked out beautifully. But the whole, WAWG, that plot
Yes,
line, they were also right. He wanted to stab Sarita and Connie
for
both.
sure, for sure.
Because it's like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, what is wrong with you? And we've all encountered
Well,
those kind of people, right? We've all
yes.
encountered them.
And I feel like we had trouble with them before in Inevitable Seduction or Attraction, whichever one is Nubia's book.
Yeah, yeah,
And we got a little Nubia drop that she left them for Nubia Media,
yep, yep.
and was doing her own thing. But yeah, Soraya and Sarita and Connie were a whole disaster. I wish them the worst. I want nothing to do with them.
Seriously, seriously. They've been messy. They've been messy, and they continue to be messy. So it was good when they got their comeuppance,
Absolutely.
how the station was handled, because it was just like, what is wrong with you?
Right.
Why are you just so evil?
Right. This is not
Problem.
necessary.
It's
Like,
not.
we got a Trent and Jade drop,
Yep,
where Will is doing the interview and we see Jade being her overprotective self
yep,
and Trent basking in
yep,
it because
yep.
he very much loves the fact that she wants to shelter him, which is something that he's never had until her. Um,
And I liked
and
how Will handled that, right? I liked Will being like, listen, I am a fan. I was a fan before it happened, before you went to
hmm
jail. As a fan, I reacted in my disappointment, which I thought I was entitled to
yep,
be disappointed, because I wanted the best for you and from you. And also, when you came back, I cheered on your redemption
yes,
story as a fan, right? So she was like, I
hmm
am not being inconsistent here. All that I've done and all that I've said has been as a fan,
hmm
and I thought
hmm
she handled that very nicely, because I do think, my husband and I were talking about this today, about a particular Black journalist who, according to my husband, has basically made his name off of tearing other Black athletes down. I don't necessarily agree with
mm
that, but we kind of
hmm
agreed to disagree. But Will was like, this wasn't about just a hit job on you, right? She was
right.
like, I pumped my fist for you when you came into the league. I was authentic in my disappointment with the decision that you made, and I've been pumping
hmm
my fist for you as you've made your comeback.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
she wasn't wrong. And
correct.
I think that Jade is was able to ease up on that
Yes.
because she is she was this Will was describing who Jade is, but like Will is at a 1 and Jade is at a 99 in
Yes.
terms of intensity, where when Trent made mistakes, Jade called him on it
Yep. Yep.
to the tune of moving out.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
or even when just various scenarios during their time together where she had to say, let's get this straight, you're a little bit off on here,
Yeah.
that she could see the authenticity in Will saying, like, I'm not who you think I am, I'm not one of the people who you need to watch out for.
Well, just as an aside, because the last sample that Love posted last, I think she might have posted it Friday, and then she announced today that Love's Encroachment is being released next Monday. But
Oh my.
in the sample that she released, it's a conversation between Trent and Lons, the new head
Hmm.
coach, and he gets into Jade and his obligation to her and what she deals with during
Hmm.
the season, and how she holds him down, how she takes care of their family, and his responsibility and accountability to her. And his bottom line to his new head coach is, I asked them to hire a coach that could understand where I'm coming from, and
Mm.
my accountability to this woman that holds me down, right? When I have to be away from her to play this game. It's a really well done scene.
Interesting.
Unsurprising, right?
Okay.
Love just
Right.
gives you these glimpses where you're like, the sacrifices that are made by an athlete's
Hmm.
family to support them, while
Right.
we as
Right.
fans are just entertained.
Right.
And
Exactly.
Trent was basically making the point of, he's like, I asked ownership and leadership to give me a head coach that could understand where I'm coming from, and they've sent me you. You're not married, you don't have any children, right? So you
Hmm.
can't understand where I'm coming from. It
Right.
was an interesting conversation, so I look forward to next
That
week.
sounds
But
like a very grown up Trent. I'm excited to read
yes,
that.
yes, yes, yes. But another moment in determining possession that I loved was when Carla says to Will, I think they were coming up on the 1 year anniversary maybe of what would have been her wedding, right?
Mm.
And she's having mixed emotions about that, and her mother says to her, I understand, but look at where you are and look at what you have, right? You
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
wanted your
Yes.
own,
Yep. Yep.
you
Yep.
wanted your own show, you have it. You wanted to be in a loving, healthy, committed relationship, you have that. You wanted a baby. We are weeks away from you having
Mm-hmm.
that, right? And so she's like,
Mm-hmm.
I understand it didn't happen the way you wanted it to, and you
Right.
went through some stuff to get here, but you are here. Take
Mm-hmm.
a moment and embrace that. Take a moment and
Yeah.
enjoy and bask in that, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I, that's life, right? It does
I
not
agree.
always play out the way that you mapped it out. Often it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes we can get caught up in the way we got there. And
Mm-hmm.
the danger is that you're so caught up in it not happening the way you wanted it to, that you miss the blessings that you have.
Yeah. I agree.
And I liked her mother just kind of reminding her of that. Like, I'm not poo pooing how you feel, I'm not being dismissive of how you feel, but I do want to remind you to take a moment and reflect on the fact that for all that you went through, you
Mm-hmm.
have everything that
Yep.
you said you wanted.
Which is why in the overview I was talking about how, like, I just kind of like tried to summarize, like, she lost it all but got
Yep.
it back in a
Yep.
much better way.
Yes.
um
Because the show, right? She had
yep.
full creative control when what
Mm-hmm.
she was jockeying for still would have been at the hands of,
Yes. Yes.
two people who candidly didn't support her and didn't have her back, right?
Right.
Um,
And we're never going to. There was nothing she
correct.
could. So it was almost like, and I know we got to wrap up, but like, so there was nothing she could do to make Darius be faithful. That was all him.
Mm-hmm.
There was
Mm-hmm.
nothing she could do to make Connie and Sarita be human.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was all
Yep.
them.
Yep.
There was nothing she could do to make sure that she didn't miscarry. That was completely out of her control. And there was nothing she could do to keep Jessica from putting that stuff out on the internet. And so it was like over and over and over again, so much of her life pre relationship with Ramsey was, as much as she felt like she was in control, she was really out of control. She really
Right.
had no control over these people's behavior. And she was really spending a lot of time, it sounds like, trying to force those square pegs into round holes. But
Yes. Yes.
once she allowed herself, once it was kind of ripped away, and without it, she really didn't have no choice but to allow life to organically put itself right, that now you actually have, like what her mom said, now see, before it was the illusion, now you actually have what you thought you had,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
which I think is such a great way to tell a story like this.
Yes.
Like, it's very
Yes.
much double for your trouble, as
Yep.
they say in the church, even though I don't go no more. All right. Last things. their proposal was so, I mean, his proposal and his little speech time, my little heart was just going pitter patter.
Yes. Yes.
I think it was all there. You didn't need to watch her or read her walk down the aisle, because all of the love and all of the commitment and all of the finally it's you, you know, all of Jesse Powell, baby issue, all of
Yes.
that
Yes.
was was done, and we didn't need that at all, to like, it would not have added anything. So if Love's Encroachment is coming out next Monday, we got a little bit of a problem.
And
Because we have two more stories to get through. So what do you want to do? Do you want to stop and read Love's Encroachment and then come back? Or do you want to just finish out, do Rut, and then do Nate, and then do Love's Encroachment?
to be timely, right? We
Yeah,
gotta
we should
do,
stop and do it.
yeah, we do Love's Encroachment, and then we can circle back, because I feel like anyone who's
Yeah,
interested in reliving Nate and
right,
Sloan and Rut and Parker's journey will listen. But Love's Encroachment is going to be the one that,
right.
hot off the presses.